I want to show you a heartbreaking segment here. This is from HLN. It was recorded on September 3rd. HLN is like a sister network of CNN. Apparently, they do more real work than CNN does, because CNN is usually focusing on some silly nonsense and not focusing on the most important issues facing this country. Well, this is focusing on one of the most important issues facing this country. 40 million Americans are facing eviction. Now, it was temporarily banned, and then it ran out in a bunch of states. Now, Trump has indicated he's going to ban it again, ban evictions again. How long will it last? I don't know. Presumably, when the pandemic is declared officially over, whether it's a year from now or whatever, they're going to start allowing evictions again. But I want to show you in this window where evictions were allowed, here's the face of it. Here's what it looks like. Here's what's actually going on in this country. Watch.
Hello, constable, need to come to the door.
From one Houston home to the next.
Hello, constable.
Deputy Benny Gant with the Harris County Constable's Office executes judge's orders to evict.
Hello, constable.
We ain't got nowhere to go.
Israel Rodriguez is the tenant at this apartment, but he's not alone. 20-month-old Israel, his brother, 4-year-old Fabian, and their mother are some of the estimated 40 million Americans facing eviction in the downward spiral of the COVID economy.
They didn't rush us, but they were like, get everything you need.
Rodriguez admits he hasn't been paying rent, behind thousands of dollars.
It's my fault in the eviction. There was a lot going on during the corona. When it hit, I lost my job. So it took me like a month to get another job. This is my check, but I ain't making it with $300. It's literally $300.
Their stroller now carries their possessions.
It's mainly the kids' clothes because me and her just wear the same clothes almost every day. Make sure we got, toilet paper and a little bit of snacks for the kids.
What are you going to do with all of your stuff?
That's trash. They get thrown in the trash because we don't have a car. We don't have help. We don't have nobody that can come, help us out right now. Nobody. We got ourselves, me and the kids and her. That's it.
How does you as law enforcement feel about seeing that family have to go?
Oh, it's a tough situation. I've got 6 kids, 6 children. And, the kids see the mom and dad in desperate situations. It's tough.
Now, imagine that tens of millions of times with all these families. Again, poverty and stuff like we're seeing now, these are not individual personal failures. These are systemic failures. It's not like you're not a good person, you didn't work hard enough, it's on you. The system's kind of BS. The system's kind of BS. When you have 40 million people facing eviction, I don't know how anybody could point the finger at themselves, and I don't even know how they can carry out the evictions and feel okay with it. Now, again, thankfully, they're staving it off now more and more and more. I'm concerned about what the hell is going to happen when the pandemic is officially over and they allow evictions all around the country again. Clearly, everybody has the ability, the government, the federal government and the state governments have the ability to say, we're banning this, no evictions. But at some point, they're going to roll that back. And people are not going to be able to pay. They're not going to be able to keep up with all the backed payments from when they weren't making money in the pandemic because they don't have a job, because people don't have a job. We have 20% real unemployment. A lot of people who have jobs are taking pay cuts. So they can't pay the bills. Jeff Stein of the Washington Post tweeted something. He said, the percentage of jobless workers unable to pay for basic expenses, that's food, clothing, housing, transportation, in June, that number was 19%. That's bad, right? I mean, that's during the pandemic. Basically, 20% of people who are jobless can't pay for basic expenses. By July, that number became 27%. So 3 out of 10 people without a job can't pay for basic expenses, food, clothing, housing, transportation. You want to know what that number is was, as of August, 50%. Now notice, the $600 a week unemployment benefit expired in late July. So that's one of the reasons why this happened. 50% of people who are jobless in this country can't afford clothing, housing, transportation, and food. 50% of jobless people. We just saw, I covered it, you watched it, the lines when it comes to unemployment, when it comes to people trying to get unemployment. The lines that were endless, that go blocks and blocks and blocks. The lines when it comes to food banks. Blocks and blocks and blocks, an endless line of people just trying to get some food. And these images came from months ago. What's it going to look like now? 50% of jobless people can't afford food, clothing, housing, transportation. Food. They can't afford food. 30 million people were food insecure. And again, this was a month or two ago. 30 million people were food insecure in what's supposed to be the richest country in the world. We have trillions of dollars to spend in Iraq and Afghanistan and bombing Middle Eastern countries that didn't attack us. Trillions. We have trillions of dollars to bail out Wall Street and corporations. Why do we have to rush in to give them a bailout, the people who failed? But there's no urgency to bail out the people who can't afford food, who are on the brink of eviction, who are going to lose everything they've ever had. Why don't they get a bailout? Why don't they get politicians rushing back to Washington? Why isn't universal basic income the first thing that's on the table? And why isn't it past day one when we realized the scale of the crisis? Because they don't represent you. They don't care about you. They represent the billionaires. They represent the wealthy and the corporations. This is who they serve. They represent the military-industrial complex. That's why the billions are spent on war. At some point, they're going to allow evictions again around the country. God help us on that day. We're going to be at a place where they're going to evict like 25% of the country. This is beyond Great Recession. This is Great Depression type stuff. 50% of jobless people can't afford food. 50% of jobless people can't afford food. The real unemployment rate's about 20%. You do the math on that. 20% of 350 million. And then half of those people can't afford food. This quote keeps popping up in my mind. People who make peaceful change impossible make violent revolution inevitable. Forget if it was MLK or JFK. Forget who said that quote, but it is screaming in my head right now. Screaming! It's no surprise that, there are bodies in the streets, and there has been some rioting, there has been some looting, but there's also been a lot of peaceful protests. There was a study that found over 90% of the protests were peaceful. But that should come as a surprise to nobody. In fact, surprising, and it hasn't been more widespread. Because when you have 50% of unemployed people can't afford food, that's a failed system. We're looking at a failed system. And whether it's Trump or Biden, they're just tweaks around the edges, status quo managers. They don't understand the scale of the crisis. They don't have that sense of urgency like FDR had back when the Great Depression was here. Oh man, this is heartbreaking stuff, terrifying stuff, and I wish I had a nice little cherry on top to give everybody a ray of hope, but I don't have it. It ain't there. It's on us. We got to do the work. We got to do the hard work. We got to get out there. I think people need to organize and do a general strike, and we need to have clear, specific, defined goals. Like if you do a general strike and you say, we want Medicare for all, we want UBI, and we want a living wage. Or Medicare for all, UBI, and Green New Deal to hire millions of people. Something. You have to work out the details. I would argue fiercely for Medicare for All and UBI. We could argue about the third thing, but we need to organize. We need to get out in the streets. We need a general strike because we got to force them to do the right thing. They're not going to do it. They will continue to be corrupt. They will continue to ignore you, and this number will keep going up. Right now, it's 50% of jobless workers can't afford basic expenses. At some point, it'll be 60. At some point, it'll be 80. Things will keep getting worse and worse and worse because, again, they're not there to represent you. You are not on their mind. You're an afterthought, and everything they've done in this pandemic to this point has proven that.